My name is Vincent Lavery, born and raised in Dun Laoghaire, and left Dun Laoghaire when I was 20, and I went to America, and I came back after 50 years in America. 20 years of age, I jumped on an airplane from Shannon, and I got to Seattle, Washington on the 6th of July, 1956, and I was sworn into the United States Army 13 days later. The brief story there is that my brother wasn't married at the time, and that's why I went out to visit. And after a few days, we realised we loved each other as brothers, but he was a very, very successful businessman. As far as working in business together, it just didn't quite work out. We argued, I remember the second night I was there, whether we'd get tomato soup or pea soup. And the fifth day, we argued on how to tie a package. So I realised pretty quickly we'd better stop this business venture together, and I signed up, went into the Army, and wound up in the 82nd Airborne Division, jumping out of airplanes. I was 23, and I was doing what I wanted to do. I made 25 jumps, nearly got killed on the 13th. Lucky 13, the fickle finger of fate nearly got me. And but when I look back on those 3 years in the Army, I remember the first few weeks they gave us a bayonet. We were out on practice, and there was yellow straw dummies, and this of course was just after Korea. And we had to get and go up to the straw dummy and plunge the bayonet into it. And as we did, we had to shout out in a loud voice, "Kill, Gook, kill," which of course was a very racist term. And I remember thinking, there's something wrong about this. This person that I'm shoving the bayonet into has a mother, father, brothers, sisters, children of their own. And it was just one of my first reactions while in the military as to my opposition to killing.
There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware.
Then I got out of the Army for 2 years, and I went back into the Air Force for 4 more. So obviously it was a slow process. So I spent 7 years altogether in the Armed Forces of the United States. They sent me to Florida when I went into the Air Force, Orlando, Florida, and I wrote a letter to the base newspaper criticising the price of orange juice on the base, pointing out how Orlando was the heart of the orange industry, and a glass of orange juice at the military federal base was more expensive than Times Square. They didn't publish that letter, which made me think that this wasn't very democratic, and I can't connect the dots, but as a result of my protests while that first year in Florida, they sent me up to the North Pole, to Thule, Greenland, and it was there that I became a disc jockey on Armed Forces Radio.
5:06, and here we go with another day's version of the Dawn Buster Show from Armed Forces Radio. And for the next 4 hours, we've got the best in popular music for you here, so let's get started right now with music.
I left in 65, and I was 27 years of age, and I got out and I realised I knew how to jump out of airplanes, I knew how to type 50 words a minute, and I knew how to take Gregg shorthand, and I knew how to operate a keyboard at a radio station. I knew how to kill. So I looked in the local newspaper to see if there was any jobs for male paratroop killers, typists, shorthand experts, and there wasn't. I decided then that what I wanted to do with my life was to be a teacher, a secondary school teacher, and I went to university. And in those days, going at 27 was a little unusual because I was, quote, a little old to start university, but I made it through 7 years of university. I read a letter in 1967 from a doctor in New York City critical of an article that Time magazine had just published, and the article suggested who the Democrats might nominate to run in the 68 election. It talked about Johnson, of course, was certain to run, and Hubert Humphrey may challenge him, and Eugene McCarthy. And the gist of the letter was that it didn't mention Robert Kennedy, and the doctor in New York pointed out that Kennedy was a potential candidate to run in 68, and that he, Dr. Shepard in New York, had started a grassroots organisation called Citizens for Kennedy Fulbright. I tracked down the doctor from California, and called him, and he said, wonderful, wonderful, start your own organisation. So with that, the grassroots organisation, by the time Kennedy announced in March of 1968, there was a national grassroots organisation already in place, even though up to mid-March, people really did not think Robert Kennedy was going to take on Eugene McCarthy in the primaries.
What I think is quite clear is that we can work together.
For a year and a half, I literally worked for him, and a lot of people say I knew him, and I've met people of power and history in my life, as we all have. But I did know Robert Kennedy. By that I mean he knew me by first name, and his wife knew me by first name. And had he become president, I would have got a job somewhere working in the Kennedy administration, maybe as dog catcher or something. But I definitely would have got a job, because what happened was the grassroots organisation I started in the Central Valley in California, the highest percentage of the vote for Kennedy resulted from that organisation in the state on election night.
The disenchantment with our society, the divisions, whether it's between blacks and whites, between the poor and the more affluent, or between age groups, or in the war in Vietnam, that we can start to work together. We are a great country, and a selfish country, and a compassionate country. And I intend to make that my basis for running and over the period of the next few months. My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
With the death of Robert Kennedy, a lot of changes occurred, not just in my life, but of course around the world, I would argue. Enjoyed everything I've done in my life. I don't regret anything. I'm fully engaged with it. There was no force made me do it. I did it as a free man with free will.